Thomas, today we're going to do a tweet that came in late on August 18th, 2018, and then we're going to move into the tweets of August 19th. The tweet reads, I allowed White House counsel Don McGahn and all other requested members of the White House staff to fully cooperate with the special counsel. In addition, we readily gave over 1 million pages of documents, most transparent in history, no collusion, no obstruction, witch hunt.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to attempt to decode the Trump tweets, these Trump drops, T-drops, as we like to call them, which is a letter in the alphabet beyond Q, by the way. We like to point out that there's much that is not being said. Readily gave over 1 million pages of documents. Let me please read into that what he would like to have said. And you stole many of them from the archive illegally that were from when he was president-elect. They went in and Andrew Weissman stole documents, just like they did with Manafort. They're using those stolen documents against Manafort. They're using the stolen documents of Gates against Gates. They're using the stolen documents of Michael Cohen against Michael Cohen. That's what he means. And he handed over lots of documents, and he didn't sue them at that point. He could have ended the special counsel investigation at that point for their illegal activities, but he did not. And as he says here, he let everyone in the White House they wanted to interview, including Obama's dog and Hillary's cat and the grounds people, whoever there was. Mueller has investigated them, ruined their lives, because during those investigation questioning, you have to have a legal representation, because otherwise you will be eaten up like George Papadopoulos, he now recommends, Robert Mueller recommends George Papadopoulos go to jail for 6 months for lying, supposedly, because he held up the investigation because he lied. Own words. And did he know that he was being surveilled with those words that were used against him? No. Has that ever even come out? No. So this is what happens in all grand jury cases. It's already fixed against you. And so let's not forget that while they've questioned everyone in the White House and tried to get them to turn on Trump and go against him and say bad things about him, there's nothing that they could say because he's innocent. Even the recent who's come out of the White House accusing him of things, no, they don't hold water. So what is really happening here? At the same time, Robert Mueller was giving immunity to Comey and Podesta and Rick Gates and anybody that he wanted to give immunity to, while at the same time, for the same crimes, he put Paul Manafort in jail, first off, in his house, attacked his house, stole his attorney-client privilege materials, made copies of it, gave it back to him, used it against him. And so much criminality going on in this special counsel investigation. But anyway, what is really happening, Rick Gates was given immunity, but because of that, these things are rebounding on Robert Mueller, because he's just not thinking clearly. He's not using good judgment, and his mind must be very small. It must have atrophied in his old age, because he put Rick Gates on the stand, and now Rick Gates may cause one part of the Manafort trial to be totally thrown off. It's a jury trial. If there's any doubt, then he gets off. Well, there's a lot of doubt, because Rick Gates is a big fat liar who was stealing from Manafort. And we don't know. But soon we'll find out what happens with the first part of the Manafort case. But anyway, what he's talking about here is simply the article that came out saying that Don McGahn was going to turn on him.
Well, and that leads right into the next tweet. The failing New York Times wrote a fake piece today. So this would be POTUS now, Thomas. He's awakened at 6 a.m. Sunday morning. He gets his New York Times and he proceeds, implying that because White House counsel Don McGahn was giving hours of testimony to the special counsel, he must be a John Dean type rat. But I allowed him and all others to testify. I didn't have to. I have nothing to hide.
That's the point. That's what we just underscored, was he's innocent. There's nobody can turn on him. They don't have anything to turn on him with. If there was any, I assure you that Soros and Oleg Deripaska and Fusion GPS and all of those opposition groups would have paid good money for anybody who could have come up with any evidence. They begged for it. What's really happening here? This is basically Rat Rosenstein and SS Herr Rat Mueller basically finding out that they can't get anybody to turn on Trump because they thought that everyone was corrupt in D.C. That's what they always do. They always get the rats to turn on each other. But since Trump isn't guilty, there's nothing they can do. And Trump could at any time simply say executive privilege. Sorry, executive privilege. You don't have a right to interview me because there's no crime. And executive privilege I give to all of my people, all of my staff, and then they don't have to answer any questions. He could have done that. He could have resisted the whole time. But since he has nothing to hide, he also knew that this is a great chance to see what he could see, to see what he was watching unfold before his very eyes with Comey demanding to get fired. And then, in fact, Rat Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions said that Comey should be fired, so it wasn't even necessarily the 100% decision of Donald Trump. So what was going on? Trump knew what was going on. He knew that he'd already colluded with the others who were part of that inner cabal. And basically, he's letting it all unfold because these things that he had intuitions about, I'm sure, and some of the evidence which we have been speaking about for quite some time, he knew that, and he was waiting for these other things to unfold. So he's happy to let anyone go and basically speak anything they want about him. But unfortunately, it ruined many of their lives because of the legal bills. Some of them literally lost their houses. They lost their careers based upon having to spend so much money on lawyers to defend themselves when they're innocent.
Okay, so that continued into the next tweet. I have nothing to hide and have demanded transparency so that this rigged and disgusting witch hunt can come to a close. So many lives have been ruined over nothing. McCarthyism at its worst. Yet, Mueller and his gang of Dems refuse to look at the real crimes on the other side. Media is even worse.
Oh, yeah. Transparency, it's always been transparent from his side. I hope he doesn't actually go and answer any questions because he doesn't have to. And when we talk about McCarthyism, why are they pointing at Russia? Russia is no longer communism. Why are they always using Russia-phobia? It's really nothing more than the propaganda of the Atlantic Council, which tries to make Russia out to be the evil empire that we must have NATO in existence for. Basically, Atlantic Council makes sure that NATO continues. That's what it's all about. And that's what the real Russian opposition is all about, is it was created, it was manufactured by the Atlantic Council. Russian phobia. Where is McCarthyism now? That would be China. China is a totalitarian communist country, and they have a new program. Thank you very much, Eric Schmidt. Thank you very much, James Breyer, for going to China and setting up a digital totalitarian government. The program is called Dragonfly, and it gives you social credit points, or it takes them away, based upon what you do in the digital realm. So you want to talk about communism? You want to talk about the new McCarthyism? Why don't you pay attention to the fact that Trump is breaking the back of China? And that's what the real news is, instead of getting out of trying to create a rat. You want a rat? You know what you guys remind me of? You remind me of this scourge of California that's going on. It's called the large wharf rat plague in California. And sometimes I can't really hardly tell the difference between those large wharf rats and some of the Democratic politicians. And so the special counsel is there to hide. It's to obscure, obfuscate, cover up, and impeach Trump. That's not transparency. That's what the gang of the Democrats want, is to conquer Trump, to impeach Trump. That is the whole point. Now they get 60 days before the next election. They're supposed to stop this nonsense. Do they? No, they continue on and make sure that no matter what, it's all leaked to the mainstream media. Every single day there's a leak out of the special counsel. And guess what? One single leak causes it to then be completely invalid, because then it is no longer secret. And the entire point of a grand jury indictment is that it be secret. And remember, if there was a McCarthyism going on now, and it was for love of Russia, then that award would have to go to Putin's best friends forever, Hillary and Obama, who gave more to Russia than anyone in history. And to act like they're our enemy now and that they should be, we should be afraid of Russia, is a real joke, because They've done everything they can do in the 17 intelligence agencies, part of the intelligence community, the group that makes up the intelligence community for America. And what have they found for Russian interference in the election? The slimmest, tiniest bit of evidence of some ads that they attribute to Russians probably didn't happen, or some Russian interference probably didn't happen, or some Russians who were hackers or trolls probably didn't happen. None of that happened. But we do know, a list of at least a dozen Russians who started colluding with that intelligence community, and it was John McCain who set them on the path to get a hold of Natalia Veselnitskaya and Sergei Milian Perichenko and all of the others. So what we really have here is Russian collusion, absolutely, but it is not with Trump campaign. It's with Democrats and with people like McCain and Richard Burr from the Senate Intelligence Committee and other Republicans, rhinos, of course, Republican in name only.
No collusion and no obstruction except by crooked Hillary and the Democrats. All of the resignations and corruption, yet heavily conflicted, Bob Mueller refuses to even look in that direction. What about the Brennan, Comey, McCabe, Strzok lies to Congress or crooked emails?
We said it from the beginning. Brennan and Comey perjured themselves repeatedly. Why aren't they being prosecuted? They both were giving leaks. Why weren't they both being prosecuted by the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz? Why isn't he naming them for indictments? McCabe, we know he leaked. He committed all kinds of crimes. There are 5 investigations on McCabe. Strzok, we don't even want to get into how bad Strzok was. He still is working for the CIA. They tried to make it look like he was fired. They took away his security clearance but gave it back so he could go work with Robert Mueller to continue the attack against Trump. And they all lied before Congress. What does that mean? Why aren't they being held in contempt of Congress for their perjury? Why isn't mainstream media or even citizen journalists or Fox News or anyone asking the questions of, well, you said this on such a day and you said this on another day while you were under congressional testimony or senatorial testimony and you lied? And what about crooked emails? Crooked's email. I love that. That's a name, of course, for Hillary. And what about those? Christopher Wray says we have them. And they're just pouring into the Judicial Watch's FOIA requests a week after week. And they're finding out that there are top secret, confidential, crazy things that Hillary should never, ever have been using an open, non-secure line to discuss. So what is happening with those? Oh, no, we're going to keep focusing on now. We're going to focus on, let's see, what was the last thing? Well, not only going after, of course, Manafort for some crimes that happened years ago, had nothing to do with Trump, but let's not forget the first thing he says, which he keeps reminding us of, Trump, no collusion, no obstruction. Why is this going on? There is no crime. You've already said there's no crime, that President Trump is not even a target of the investigation. That has been said by Rosenstein over and over again. Then why? Why? Doesn't it close? Because it is election meddling. It's the same kind of election meddling.
Speaking of election meddling, I have to insert this here. Did you see Ben Carson and what he did at HUD? He put in a formal complaint about Facebook and discrimination. Did you see that article in Truth News Headlines?
Oh, yes.
Fantastic. I just love it that there are cabinet members that are wide awake looking to see how they can help instead of continue to obstruct.
Well, it shows that Facebook, a lot of people do business on Facebook, you see. And so you can't say that it's a private corporation's own platform. No, it is a public platform. So they went after Facebook for saying that they're discriminating and they're housing policies that are part of things that are posted on Facebook. That is a genius move, but it's exactly what we've been now saying for some time. They can't be both a government-sponsored monopoly and a private corporation at the same time. They have to make a choice. And so if they want to be a private corporation and they want to put all their chips at stake in this next roulette wheel turn, which is the midterm elections, good. because when they fail, because this war against the mainstream media, fake news, is a war of the people against them. They're going to turn them off. They're not going to buy the products. They're going to boycott them. And this has happened already. And you see the numbers are plummeting, and yet they're not going to report that. And by the way, those numbers are fake and they're propped up. Just like the numbers on Facebook. We now know that the numbers on Facebook are over 25% propped up so that Facebook can sell ads. That's the thing that just come out in the last week.
Which you can easily keep off, by using these different apps and things. So somebody has to be funding Facebook to keep it afloat, and I think it's all the government contracts.
Almost 40% of Facebook followers that use it in the last 2 years have dropped. So how can their stock remain stable? We've explained that this is the game that was happening with these too big to fail monopolies who are on the stock market, who are really military, weaponized psyops that were experiments that got out of hand. And that's what's really going on. But let's go back to the fact that this tweet makes reference to the resignations. Those resignations, if you look at the people who've jumped ship, who are part of this conspiracy, all you have to do is just get a net and gather them up. And they will all squeal. That's the reason they jumped ship early. Who jumped ship? Carlin and Baker and the lawyers, right? The lawyers jumped ship first. Jonathan Weiner and Sally Yates got canned, but she might as well put the noose around her neck anyway. Loretta Lynch, why did she jump ship early? You see, Trump is pointing out here that all you'd have to do is look at who resigned and look at the corruption. And then look at what Mueller will not look at, which is his recusals, and the recusals that should have happened for at least 17 of the angry Democrats in his special counsel. And what is the direction when he says that Mueller refuses to look in that direction? Well, that's the direction of these people that he's mentioned here. And if they would, then there would have to be an investigation to investigate the investigators.
Well, Mueller's not going to do that because his best friend is Comey. And we already know that he's tight with Brennan. He's not going to let his buds down. He's out protecting these very people that are named. Well, then POTUS picks up the tweet by 7 a.m. and he's tweeting out again about the failing New York Times. Wrote a story that made it seem like the White House counsel had turned on the president, when in fact it's just the opposite. And the two fake reporters knew this. This is why the fake news media has become the enemy of the people. So bad for America.
Yes, and let me just emphasize something here. The White House counsel, Don McGahn, was involved in the fiasco created by Sally Yates sending over Department of Justice representatives to interview Michael Flynn along with FBI representatives, which they then are now, which they later have said that there was nothing wrong with that conversation, and that Michael Flynn didn't lie, and that Michael Flynn didn't talk about sanctions with the Russians, and he didn't try to cover his trail, and that half the people who walked out of the meeting said Flynn was completely innocent, but that didn't stop the Justice Department from continuing to push to make it look like something went wrong, and also with Jeff Sessions, somehow Russian collusion, and they must, Sessions must recuse himself later, and Michael Flynn, well, we have to get rid of him right now. So they started attacking Michael Flynn because they knew that Michael Flynn was bringing in some ideas that they sure didn't want to reach into the National Security Council. So in terms of this particular tweet, don't forget, he says that this war is a war upon we the people. It's a war upon Americans. If they can tell us 97% falsehood, and almost everything they're saying is, in fact, falsehood, then why are they still operating? Why doesn't the federal government actually do their job for once, and the Federal Communications Commission actually bring lawsuits for Decency in Broadcasting Act violations and so on and so forth, which we've talked about so much? It is so bad for America because, as Trump has said before, he doesn't care what anybody says. Everyone should have the right of free speech to say whatever they want. But when it becomes a monopoly of not only speaking falsehood, but then when social media then becomes the new ministry of truth and these mechanisms that we've described to you before?
Well, because the people don't have a voice. I mean, it's not like we can put our views on the New York Times. That's owned by a big corporation. So the only way the people can do it is through social media. That's our platform. And what's happening is they want to take that platform away from us and force feed us their propaganda, you know what.
Absolutely, but it's very sad because what's really happening is what they fear the most, and it's happening right before them, and all they're doing is pushing harder all the time to make it happen. It's as if they want to put the noose around their neck, jump off the gallows, jump off the cliff, jump on their own spear. It is just amazing. Let's go to the next tweet so that I can kind of go off on them.
Okay, some members of the media are very angry at the fake story in the New York Times. They actually called to complain and apologize, a big step forward. From the day I announced the Times has been fake news, and with their disgusting new board member, it will only get worse.
Now, we had said, about a week ago, maybe 2, perhaps 3, I don't think so. I think it was when he was with Putin, that it cracked open. It is completely exploding. The mainstream media has reached critical mass. And it is going to implode or explode, one or the other. But it is not going to continue as it is. Why? They have no more lies to tell. And I'm going to include social media in on that. They're breaking open, they're cracking open, they're having lawsuits brought against them. And the lawsuits are going to increase at a much greater level. Because why? At a faster pace? Because as soon as the sharks smell blood in the water, everyone jumps on. Look at what happened.
Which sharks? The lawyers?
The lawyers. Look at what happened to Facebook and Google in Europe. They're decimated. They're annihilated. If they would admit it, they're dead in the water. Same thing happened to them in Australia. And when
But their stock keeps going up. Well, oh, my goodness.
Well, their stock in America keeps going up because dude Zuckerberg came and lied to Congress and then came back and lied and then came back and lied again.
Well, it
and
just shows that the stock market is rigged. That was my point. Any other company, their shares would be falling.
Well, that's the point, is that the Silicon Valley fake monopolies are being propped up by the central banks who've spent invested 1/3 of their assets in FANG, in the big Silicon Valley fake cardboard cutout tech kings, okay? Which it's all a lie, folks. We told you from the beginning, if the government wasn't supporting them, they wouldn't go on. And so as soon as Trump wants to, he's simply going to say, RICO, monopolies, discrimination, violating all broadcasting rules. All he has to do is start saying these things as tweets. And then what's going to happen? The owners of them who've already tried to cash out, the big owners who invested in these FANG companies, FAANG, FANG companies, you know which ones I'm talking about, the big monopolies, they put the money up front before it went public on the stock market, and then when it went public on the stock market, their millions became billions. And now they're out. They've sold their stock. They've moved on to different companies. And a lot of them moved on to China. And they moved on to our enemies. They've literally invested in places like Iran. Can you imagine? Oh, well, I'm not even going to get started on that. But the investments in Russia, in Iran, in all of our enemies, you name an enemy we have, that's where the really big investors are moving their money because they thought America was going to be finally gutted and basically die from vampirism once Hillary came to power. But what's really happening is Trump is going to take them down. And when he's talking about the corruption of the New York Times, didn't the New York Times just buy the Boston Globe for hundreds of millions, and then with the other assets, it's literally $1 billion or something, and then what happens? And they sell it for $1. Does that tell you that George Soros is so desperate that he will come and give, just like Carlos Slim did earlier to save New York Times, and just like the military did to save Amazon, just like Facebook did to CNN, just like Google is doing for Alphabet, just like Amazon is being supported by the Department of Defense and the CIA, and now Facebook has a Department of Defense. They have gigantic military contracts that there were no bid contracts. They were illegal contracts, again, showing that senior executive service members run our country. These deals are made without anyone in Congress, in the courts, in the White House, even knowing that they're being made. And it's hard for you to believe what I'm saying here, but how do you think these things keep happening? How do you think Trump allowed the Department of Defense to take a huge donation from Eric Schmidt to start the digital news initiative that controls the news that we see from the mainstream media?
Trump allowed that?
He didn't know it.
Oh, okay.
This is SES members making contracts for the Department of Defense that nobody even knows exists. No, it happens all the time, folks, that the bureaucracy keeps marching forward with its obstruction, with its absolute illegal activities. The same rat lines keep moving the money in the same directions to the same pockets of the same big wigs that we have outlined for you many, many, many times. But here's the great news. Trump is winning the war. The tide has been turned. We've reached critical mass. Mainstream media is imploding or exploding. That's the reason they're trying to destroy their enemies.
Because they want to try to take us down while they're going down too.
Because that's who they are. They're showing who they are. And I'm sorry for all of those that are being abused by this type of discriminatory blocking of free speech in America. It's absolutely criminal, but I can guarantee you, he has before and he will again when he wants. When the economy is ready for it, when he's done with the trade deals, when he's through the midterm elections, he will crush these companies.
He's just softening them up right now.
Correct.
And then the last tweet for today, study the late Joseph McCarthy because we are now in a period with Mueller and his gang that makes Joseph McCarthy look like a baby. Rigged witch hunt.
And the gang is very much a mafia style. It's basically legal mafia oligarchy. And who's at the top of it? That'd be Robert Mueller and James Comey, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, Pret Bharara, and all of the rest of those criminals. Who's the top two criminal lawyers in America? That would be Bill and Hillary Clinton.
And where does Bruce Orr fit in on that?
Well, Bruce Orr is interesting because he's got his fingers in everything, and I think we're going to see eventually when he does. Finally, hopefully, he's an SES member. He's in the Gang of 500, the ultimate review board. He gives himself raises. He reviews whether he's going to give himself a raise or bonuses and presidential awards. All these awards that give them tens of thousands of dollars every year. That's who that guy is. He won't allow Andrew McCabe to be fired, or Strucker Page, or anybody else that's an SES member, because that's the way that it works, folks. But don't worry, we've told you how that is being brought down. But anyway, that's my response to Mueller and his gang. But McCarthyism? You want communism? That's easy. Call up John Brennan. He voted communist when he was younger. He was brought into the CIA by a communist who's now in prison for life for being a communist spy. And then he's become a radical Islamic terrorists when it comes down to it.
When you say he, you talked about two he's
John
here.
Brennan,
okay.
And so if we're really talking about communism, then we better turn to John Brennan, one of the best experts in our country. And remember that Obama's mother was linked to the number one and the number two communists in America at the time because she was a CIA agent and she was, in fact, trying to penetrate that group. But she became very, very, very friendly with the top dogs in the Communist Party. So Obama himself was raised in an environment where communists were coming in and out of his house all the time. And you know what? Bernie's not running as a Democrat anymore. And I guess socialism didn't go far enough left for him. I wonder what his party's going to be called. The Bernie Communist Party? I don't know. But if you want communism, go to John Brennan. And all I can say is, Trump, your tweets are absolutely bunker-busting bombs. They're not nuclear because they don't leave the radiation, but they sure take those rats that are hiding under the ground in their bunkers and just make them run for the hills.